Single mom and her dog found dead husband's ranch. Her discovery shocks the town. A single mom and her loyal dog arrive at a long-abandoned ranch left behind by her late husband. But when the dog starts digging near the barn, they uncover something no one expected: an old military trunk buried deep in the ground. Inside are letters, weapons, and secrets her husband never dared to share. Word spreads fast, and soon soldiers and helicopters surround the land, shining spotlights on something even more terrifying: an underground bunker hidden beneath the soil. What was her husband hiding all these years? Why does the government want it silenced at all costs? As she fights to protect her daughter and her husband's legacy, she'll uncover a truth powerful enough to shake the whole town to its core. But can one grieving mother stand against a secret powerful men would kill to keep buried? Comment below and tell me where in the world you're joining from, and if this story made you pause for a moment, and hit that subscribe button for more. The early morning sun cast long shadows across Charlotte Carter's driveway as she loaded the last of their supplies into her weathered blue pickup truck. The old vehicle had seen better days, but it was reliable, just like everything else her late husband James had left behind. Her hands lingered on the cool metal of the tailgate as memories washed over her. 10-year-old Lily bounded down the front porch steps, her blonde ponytail bouncing with each step. "Mom, I packed extra dog treats for Duke," she called out, clutching her worn backpack decorated with faded butterfly stickers. Duke, their loyal German shepherd, trotted behind Lily, his tail wagging as he heard his name. His warm brown eyes watched Charlotte carefully, as if he could sense the weight of her thoughts. "That's thoughtful of you, sweetheart." Charlotte managed a smile, though her heart ached. Every time she looked at Lily, she saw traces of James, the same determined chin, the same curious spark in her eyes. As they climbed into the truck, Charlotte's fingers brushed against the deed tucked safely in her jacket pocket. It had arrived in a plain envelope just weeks after the funeral, with no return address. The paper was yellowed, the legal language faded but clear: a ranch property she'd never known about, left in James's name. The engine rumbled to life, and Duke settled in the back seat next to Lily. As they pulled away from their suburban home, Charlotte's mind drifted to that last conversation with James. He'd been different that day, distracted, almost urgent. His final words now echoed in her thoughts: "Go to the land. The truth will be waiting." "Mom?" Lily's voice pulled her back to the present. "Did Daddy ever talk about this place?" Charlotte shook her head, steering them onto the highway. "No, honey. This is as much a surprise to me as it is to you." The journey took them through changing landscapes, from city outskirts to rolling countryside, and finally onto a dusty dirt road that seemed to lead nowhere. Duke's ears perked up as they bounced along the uneven track, his nose pressed against the window. After 3 hours of driving, they turned onto an overgrown path marked by a fallen wooden sign. Charlotte's heart skipped a beat as she made out the faded letters: Carter Ranch. The property stretched out before them like a forgotten photograph. Weathered wooden cabins stood silent against the backdrop of distant mountains. Fields that might once have been gardens or pastures had surrendered to wild grass and scattered wildflowers. The main house, if you could call it that, was a 2-story structure with peeling paint and a sagging porch. "It looks lonely," Lily whispered, pressing her face against the window. Charlotte had to agree. There was something both beautiful and unsettling about the abandoned ranch. The silence felt heavy, broken only by the whisper of wind through tall grass and the occasional call of a distant bird. They parked near the main house, and Duke was the first one out, leaping from the back seat as soon as Charlotte opened the door. His nose immediately went to work, sniffing the ground with intense concentration. "Stay close, Lily," Charlotte cautioned as they stepped out of the truck. The air smelled of sage and sun-baked earth. Their boots crunched on gravel as they followed Duke's excited exploration. "Look, Mom." Lily pointed to a rusty windmill creaking slowly in the breeze. "It's like in those old Western movies Daddy used to watch." Charlotte swallowed hard. James had loved Westerns, another detail about him that now seemed to hold hidden meaning. What other secrets had he kept? Duke led them past the main house toward a large barn that listed slightly to one side. Its red paint had faded to a dusty pink, and one of the big doors hung crooked on its hinges. The dog's behavior changed as they approached. His tail stopped wagging, and his movements became more purposeful. "What is it, boy?" Charlotte watched as Duke circled an area near the barn's foundation. Suddenly, he began to dig with fierce determination, dirt flying from his paws. "Duke, stop." Charlotte started forward, but something made her pause. The dog had never behaved like this before. He was trained, disciplined. This wasn't like him at all. Lily clutched Charlotte's hand. "Mom, I think he found something." The sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in deep oranges and purples. Duke's digging had revealed something solid beneath the soil, something that definitely didn't belong there naturally. Charlotte knelt beside the hole, her heart pounding. Using her hands, she helped Duke clear away more dirt until her fingers struck metal. It was a trunk, military style, with faded green paint and official markings stenciled on the lid. Her hands trembled as she brushed away the last of the soil. The trunk was locked, but the years underground had weakened the mechanism. With a deep breath, Charlotte gripped the lid and pulled. It creaked open slowly, protesting years of disuse, as the last rays of sunlight illuminated what lay within. The shadows grew longer around them as Charlotte knelt there, Duke at her side, both of them focused on the mysterious trunk that James had somehow known they would find. Her fingers hovered over the opening, hesitating at the threshold of whatever truth her husband had left behind. The evening shadows lengthened as Charlotte set up the old camping lantern she'd brought from the truck. Its warm glow cast a circle of light around the open trunk, where she and Lily knelt in the dusty barn. Duke lay nearby, his watchful eyes reflecting the lantern's gleam. Charlotte's hand shook as she lifted out the first photograph. The black and white image showed James, looking younger than she'd ever known him, standing among a group of soldiers in desert fatigues. Their faces were grimy, but they were smiling, arms thrown around each other's shoulders like brothers. "I don't recognize any of these men," Charlotte murmured, more to herself than to Lily. She'd thought she knew everything about James's military service. Just a few years as a mechanic, nothing special, he'd always said. But these photos told a different story. "Look at this one, Mom." Lily carefully pulled out another photograph. This one showed James in full combat gear, his face serious as he crouched beside a military vehicle Charlotte didn't recognize. The vehicle bore markings that had been deliberately blurred in the photo. Charlotte's throat tightened as she sifted through more items. Military patches with symbols she didn't understand. Faded documents written in official language, most of them too water-damaged to read clearly. And there, wrapped in an old cloth, lay a rusted pistol. "Be careful, honey," Charlotte warned as Lily reached for another photo. Her mind was spinning. James had always been so open, so honest about everything. Why would he hide this part of his life? "Mom?" Lily's voice was small but clear in the lantern-lit barn. "Did Dad have another life? One he never told us about?" Charlotte forced herself to smile, though her heart was racing. "Your father loved us very much, Lily. Sometimes grown-ups have complicated pasts, but that doesn't change who they were to us. But why didn't he tell us?" "I wish I knew, sweetheart." Charlotte wrapped an arm around her daughter's shoulders, trying to hide how badly her hands were shaking. Sometimes people keep secrets to protect the ones they love. Duke suddenly lifted his head, ears perked forward. A moment later, Charlotte heard the crunch of tires on gravel. Headlights swept across the barn's weathered walls. "Stay here," Charlotte told Lily, getting to her feet. She stepped out of the barn just as a police cruiser pulled up, its headlights cutting through the gathering darkness. Sheriff Daniels stepped out, his boots raising small clouds of dust. He was a tall man with gray threading through his dark hair, his face lined with years of sun and worry. "Evening, Mrs. Carter. Word travels fast in these parts. Heard there was activity out at the old ranch." Charlotte crossed her arms, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. "It's my ranch now, Sheriff. My husband left it to us." "James Carter's widow?" The sheriff's expression shifted slightly. "Didn't know he had family claim to this place. It's been abandoned long as I can remember." "We just found out ourselves," Charlotte said carefully. "Got the deed in the mail after he passed." The sheriff nodded slowly, his eyes drifting toward the barn where the lantern light spilled out. "Found anything interesting?" Charlotte hesitated. Something in his tone made her wary. "Just old farm equipment. We're still looking around. Mind if I take a look?" Before Charlotte could answer, Lily appeared in the barn doorway, Duke at her side. "Mom, is everything okay?" The sheriff's face softened at the sight of the young girl. "Hello there, little lady. Just checking in on you folks. These old properties can be dangerous after sitting empty so long." Charlotte moved slightly, positioning herself between the sheriff and the barn entrance. "We're being careful." Sheriff Daniels studied her for a long moment, then glanced around at the darkening landscape. "Look, Mrs. Carter, I'm going to give you some advice. Lock this place up tight tonight. These old ranches, they can attract attention you might not want." The warning in his voice was clear. Charlotte nodded slowly. "We appreciate your concern, Sheriff." He touched the brim of his hat and turned back to his cruiser. As the red taillights disappeared down the drive, Charlotte hurried back into the barn. Something about the sheriff's visit had unsettled her deeply. "Let's pack this up for tonight," she told Lily, kneeling beside the trunk. As she began carefully returning items to the box, her fingers brushed something she hadn't noticed before, an envelope, tucked into a corner of the trunk. Charlotte's heart nearly stopped. The envelope was sealed, and on the front, in James's familiar handwriting, were the words, "For Charlotte and Lily." The first rays of dawn crept through the cabin's dusty windows, casting long shadows across the worn wooden floor. Charlotte sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug of fresh coffee. The old percolator bubbled softly on the ancient stove, filling the air with its rich aroma. At her feet, Duke snored contentedly, his large frame stretched out across the faded linoleum. The envelope felt heavy in her hands, though it contained only a few sheets of paper. Charlotte traced her fingers over James's handwriting, remembering how he used to leave her little notes in her lunch bag or tucked into her novels. But this was different. This wasn't a love note. This was something that had been deliberately hidden. With trembling fingers, she carefully broke the seal. The paper inside was crisp, as if it had been protected from the elements all these years. She unfolded it slowly, her heart pounding as she began to read. My dearest Charlotte and Lily, if you're reading this, then you've found the trunk. And I'm no longer there to explain things in person. I'm so sorry for all the secrets I've kept from you both. Every day, the weight of what I couldn't tell you ate away at me. Before I met you, Charlotte, I was part of something bigger than myself. Something I thought would make a difference in the world. We were young soldiers then, idealistic and ready to serve our country. But what happened during that covert mission changed everything. Men, good men, friends, never came home. Their families were told lies, fed stories about training accidents and peacetime operations. The truth has been buried here at the ranch all these years. I've guarded it, knowing that someday it might be needed to set things right. But I couldn't risk telling you, couldn't put that burden on your shoulders while I was alive. The people involved, they're powerful, Charlotte. They've built careers on keeping this quiet. I know this must feel like a betrayal. You're probably angry with me right now, and you have every right to be. But everything I did, every secret I kept, was to protect you and Lily. You two were my whole world. If the truth finds you, and it might, protect it. Those men who never came home, their families deserve to know what really happened. But be careful. Be so very careful. Charlotte had to stop reading for a moment, wiping tears from her eyes. The coffee had grown cold beside her, forgotten. Duke stirred at her feet, sensing her distress, and pressed his warm body against her legs. The letter continued, and with each word, Charlotte felt her heart breaking further. James had carried this burden alone for so many years. How many nights had he lain awake, beside her, wrestling with these secrets? How many times had he wanted to tell her but couldn't? The hardest part was knowing I might leave you someday without explaining everything. But if you're reading this, then you're stronger than I ever was. You've always been the brave one, Charlotte. Even if you didn't know it. Trust your instincts. Trust Duke. He's more than just a dog, as you've probably figured out by now. He was trained for this, to protect and to help find what's hidden. I love you both more than life itself. Whatever you decide to do with what you find, know that you were always the best part of me. All my love, James. Charlotte pressed the letter to her chest, feeling hollow and full at the same time. Betrayal and understanding warred inside her heart. She wanted to be angry with him for keeping such huge secrets, for leaving her unprepared for whatever might come. But she could also feel his love, and his torment in every carefully chosen word. Duke's sudden growl pulled her from her thoughts. His ears were pricked forward, his body tense as he rose to his feet. Charlotte quickly folded the letter, and slipped it into her pocket, moving to the window just as headlights swept across the front of the cabin. A black SUV pulled up, its engine purring to a stop in the pre-dawn light. The driver's door opened, and an elderly man stepped out. Even in the dim light, his military bearing was unmistakable, back straight, shoulders squared, every movement precise and purposeful. He wore civilian clothes, but Charlotte knew immediately, this was no casual visitor. The man walked to the cabin's front door with measured steps. Duke's growl deepened, and Charlotte laid a steadying hand on his collar. 3 sharp knocks echoed through the quiet cabin. When Charlotte opened the door, she found herself face to face with a man whose steel-gray eyes seemed to look right through her. His silver hair was cut military short, and despite his age, he radiated authority. "Mrs. Carter," he said, his voice clipped and formal. "I'm Colonel Richard Hale, retired. I believe you have something that belongs to the government, a trunk containing classified military materials. I'm here to collect it." The morning sun cast long shadows across the ranch as Charlotte stood her ground on the cabin's weathered porch. Colonel Hale's presence seemed to make the air itself grow heavier, but she wouldn't let him see her fear. "This ranch and everything on it belongs to me," Charlotte said, her voice steadier than she felt. "My husband left it to me legally. I have the paperwork to prove it." The colonel's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Mrs. Carter, you don't understand the situation. That trunk contains sensitive military information. Its contents are classified and remain government property, regardless of where it was found." Duke pressed against Charlotte's leg, his low growl a constant reminder that she wasn't alone. Through the screen door behind her, she could hear Lily moving around inside the cabin. "With all due respect, Colonel," Charlotte said, crossing her arms, "if you want to take anything from this property, you'll need to show me the proper documentation. A court order, perhaps?" Something dangerous flickered across Colonel Hale's face. "Your husband was involved in matters beyond your understanding. For your own good, and your daughter's, I suggest you cooperate." The threat in his words was clear, though his tone remained perfectly civil. Charlotte felt her heart hammering but kept her expression neutral. Is that a threat, Colonel? Simply friendly advice, Mrs. Carter. We wouldn't want any unfortunate accidents to occur out here. It's quite isolated, after all. He gestured at the surrounding wilderness. Things happen. People get hurt, especially when they meddle in affairs that don't concern them. Charlotte's throat went dry, but James's words from the letter echoed in her mind. Trust your instincts. I think you should leave now, she said firmly, unless you have that court order. Colonel Hale's face hardened. Very well. But remember, I tried to handle this civilly. He turned on his heel and walked back to his SUV with military precision. Charlotte watched until his vehicle disappeared down the dusty road, her hands shaking as the tension finally released. Duke whined and nudged her hand with his nose. It's okay, boy, she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was reassuring him or herself. As the day wore on, Charlotte couldn't shake the feeling of unease. She kept Lily close, using the excuse of exploring the ranch together to keep an eye on her. They walked the property's perimeter, Charlotte noting possible escape routes, just in case. Near the barn, something caught her eye. The earth looked different, disturbed, as if someone had been digging recently, but it wasn't the obvious kind of digging Duke had done to find the trunk. This was more careful, methodical. Lily, honey, stay here with Duke for a minute, Charlotte said, moving closer to investigate. The soil had been expertly replaced, but there were slight differences in color and texture that gave it away. Someone had been searching for something. The sound of distant helicopters started just as the sun was setting. Charlotte had just finished getting Lily ready for bed when the first one roared overhead, its deep thrum making the cabin's windows rattle. Mom? Lily called out, clutching her stuffed rabbit. What's happening? It's okay, sweetie, Charlotte said, though her heart was racing. Let's just stay inside. More helicopters joined the first, their searchlights sweeping across the property like giant fireflies. Duke began barking frantically at the window. Through the glass, Charlotte could see military vehicles approaching, their headlights cutting through the darkness. The helicopter's spotlights suddenly converged near the barn, illuminating something that made Charlotte's breath catch. There, partially exposed by the earlier searching, was a metal door set flush with the ground. It looked like a bunker entrance, the kind she'd seen in old war movies. Soldiers poured out of the vehicles, their movements precise and coordinated. They quickly established a perimeter, setting up portable lights and unrolling yellow caution tape around the area. Charlotte held Lily close as they watched from the cabin window. Duke stood guard beside them, his body tense and alert. Mom, what are they doing? Lily whispered, her small hands gripping Charlotte's shirt. Charlotte thought about James's letter, about the secrets he'd kept and the truth he'd wanted protected. Looking at the underground entrance and the military's swift response, everything started falling into place. She pulled Lily closer, kissing the top of her head, as she watched the soldiers rope off the site. This is what he meant by the truth, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of the helicopters. The pale light of dawn crept across the ranch, casting long shadows over the military equipment scattered around the bunker entrance. Charlotte watched from the cabin window as the soldiers, exhausted from their night shift, began packing up their gear. Only 2 guards remained, both looking sleepy and bored as they leaned against their vehicle. Now's our chance, Charlotte whispered to Lily, who was already dressed and ready. Duke's ears perked up, sensing the shift in energy. Remember what we talked about, quiet as mice. They slipped out the back door, using the early morning shadows to their advantage. Duke led the way, his dark fur blending perfectly with the dimness. Charlotte held Lily's hand tightly as they crept from shadow to shadow, their hearts pounding with each step. The remaining guards were more interested in their coffee cups than their surroundings. Charlotte waited until they were deep in conversation before guiding her family behind a stack of equipment cases. From there, it was just a quick dash to the bunker entrance. The yellow caution tape fluttered in the morning breeze. Charlotte lifted it carefully, helping Lily duck underneath before following with Duke. The metal door was heavy, but the soldiers had already broken its ancient seal. It took both Charlotte and Lily pushing together to swing it open just enough to slip inside. The air that rushed out was stale and cold, carrying decades of secrets. Charlotte clicked on her flashlight, revealing steep metal stairs descending into darkness. Duke went first, his nails clicking against the steps. Lily stayed close behind Charlotte, her small hand gripping the back of her mother's jacket. It smells funny down here, Lily whispered, wrinkling her nose. That's just old air, honey, Charlotte assured her, though her own heart was racing. The beam of light swept across the underground space, revealing a scene frozen in time. Metal bunk beds lined one wall, their olive green blankets still tucked in with military precision. Sealed wooden crates were stacked in neat rows, their stenciled lettering faded but still readable. Classified, Operation Nighthawk. A thick layer of dust covered everything, undisturbed until now. But it was the far wall that made Charlotte gasp. Dozens of photographs were pinned there, showing men in uniform, her husband's unit. She recognized James in several of them, looking so young and serious. Below each photo was a name, rank, and status. Her stomach churned as she read the word, missing, stamped in red across photo after photo. "Dad!" Lily exclaimed, pointing to one of the pictures. James stood with his arm around another soldier, both of them smiling despite their dusty uniforms. The other man's photo had the red missing stamp across it. Charlotte's fingers traced the edges of the photographs, her mind spinning with questions. How many of these men had families waiting for them? How many children grew up without fathers, like Lily? A stack of leather-bound journals caught her eye on a nearby desk. Duke nudged one with his nose, as if he knew its importance. Charlotte picked it up, recognizing James's neat handwriting on the cover. Her hands trembled as she opened it, dust cascading from its pages. The first page made her heart stop. Written in James's familiar hand were the words, "If you're reading this, it means I've failed to return." Lily pressed against her side, peering at the journal. "What does it say, Mom?" Charlotte couldn't find her voice for a moment, overwhelmed by the weight of what they'd discovered. The bunker suddenly felt too small, too full of ghosts and unanswered questions, but she forced herself to stay steady for Lily's sake. "It's from Dad," she finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "He left us a message." Duke's ears suddenly pricked up, and a low growl rumbled in his chest. From above, they could hear the sound of vehicles approaching, the next shift of soldiers arriving to continue their work. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the cabin windows as Charlotte and Lily lugged the last of the journals inside. Duke helped by carrying smaller notebooks in his gentle mouth, his tail wagging with pride at contributing to their mission. They had made several trips back and forth from the bunker, careful to avoid the guards' attention. "My arms feel like noodles," Lily complained, flopping onto the worn couch. A cloud of dust puffed up around her, making her giggle despite her exhaustion. Charlotte arranged the journals chronologically on the kitchen table, running her fingers over the worn leather covers. "Let's see what secrets these hold," she said, pulling out a chair. "Would you like to hear some?" Lily nodded eagerly, moving to sit beside her mother. Duke settled at their feet, ever watchful. Charlotte opened the earliest journal, dated 19 years ago. "Dear God," she whispered. "I had no idea James was writing these for so long." She cleared her throat and began reading aloud. "First day of Special Ops training. They picked 6 of us for something classified. Colonel Matthews says we're the best of the best. But I can't shake this feeling that..." A sharp knock at the door made them all jump. Duke sprang to his feet, hackles raised as he let out a low growl. Charlotte's heart raced as she quickly gathered the journals, shoving them into a nearby cabinet. "Lily, honey, go to your room," she whispered urgently. Another knock, more insistent this time. "Mrs. Carter? My name is Tom Alvarez. I'm a military historian. I need to speak with you about your husband." Charlotte hesitated, her hand on the cabinet door. The voice sounded different from the commanding military tones she'd heard lately, softer, almost pleading. She peered through the window beside the door. A man in his 40s stood on the porch, wearing khakis and a wrinkled button-down shirt. He held a leather briefcase and looked nothing like the threatening figures who'd been pressuring her. His shoulders were slightly hunched, his expression worried but kind. "Please," he called out. "I've been researching missing veterans for years. I heard rumors about what you found here." Charlotte felt torn between caution and desperate need for answers. She looked at Lily, who had paused halfway to her room. "What do you think, sweetie? Should we trust him?" Lily studied the man through the window. "He looks sad, Mommy. Like he needs help too." After a moment's consideration, Charlotte opened the door, though she kept the security chain latched. "How did you hear about this place?" Tom Alvarez's face brightened with relief. "I have contacts in the veteran community. Word spreads fast when someone finds something significant." He pulled out a business card, passing it through the gap. "I teach military history at the State University. I've spent the last decade tracking cases of missing soldiers, especially from classified operations." Charlotte examined the card, then looked back at his earnest face. Something in his eyes reminded her of James. That same burning need to uncover the truth. She unlatched the chain. As Tom stepped inside, Duke approached him cautiously, sniffing his pant legs. After a moment, the dog's tail gave a tentative wag. "I've been looking for evidence about your husband's unit for years," Tom explained, setting his briefcase on the table. "There were rumors, horrible rumors, about what happened to those men." "What kind of rumors?" Charlotte asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Tom's face darkened. "That their commanding officer, Colonel Matthews, betrayed them. Sold out their location during a classified mission. 6 men never came home." He pulled out a folder filled with newspaper clippings and photographs. The official story was that they were killed in action, but bodies were never recovered. Families never got closure. Charlotte sank into a chair, her legs suddenly weak. James never talked about his service. He'd wake up sometimes, terrified, but he'd never tell me why. "He couldn't," Tom said gently. They were sworn to secrecy. But something made your husband start documenting everything. He gestured to the cabinet where Charlotte had hidden the journals. Those might finally prove what really happened. Charlotte studied Tom's face for a long moment. His eyes held years of frustrated searching, of dead ends and unanswered questions. She recognized that look. She'd seen it in her mirror every day since James died. "Will you help us understand?" Lily asked suddenly, stepping forward. "Help us understand about Daddy?" Tom knelt down to Lily's level. "That's exactly what I want to do. Help families like yours know the truth about their loved ones." He looked up at Charlotte. "If you'll let me." Charlotte took a deep breath, then stood and opened the cabinet. "We'll work together," she said firmly, placing the journals on the table. These men's families deserve to know what happened to them. They spent hours going through the journals, with Tom explaining military terms and helping piece together the timeline. As evening fell, Lily dozed on the couch, while Charlotte and Tom continued their work by lamplight. Late that night, after Tom had left with copies of key pages and promises to return tomorrow, Charlotte sat alone at the kitchen table. Duke's head rested in her lap as she read James's words by the soft glow of the lamp. "I volunteered to protect these records, knowing the risk. Someone has to guard the truth, no matter the cost. If anything happens to me, I pray these journals find their way to the right hands. The families of my brothers in arms deserve to know their sacrifices weren't in vain. They deserve justice." Charlotte's tears fell onto the weathered page as she finally drifted off to sleep, her husband's words echoing in her heart. Duke kept his faithful vigil beside her, his warm presence a comfort in the quiet night. The morning sun filtered through the dusty windows of the ranch cabin, casting long shadows across the kitchen table, where Charlotte, Lily, and Tom had gathered for breakfast. The aroma of fresh coffee mingled with the scent of toast and eggs, but their attention was fixed on the weathered journals and letters spread before them. Duke lay at Charlotte's feet, his tail occasionally thumping against the wooden floor as he watched them work. Tom had brought in several cardboard boxes from his car, organizing the materials into neat piles. "We should start with the earliest dates," Tom suggested, pushing his wire-rimmed glasses up his nose. He carefully opened one of the journals, its pages yellow with age. These men, they wrote everything down. Not just mission details, but their thoughts, their fears. Charlotte picked up another journal, running her fingers over the faded handwriting. "Listen to this," she said softly. "March 15. Another sleepless night. Sarah's birthday is tomorrow. Our daughter will be turning 3 years old, and I won't be there to see her blow out the candles. The things we sacrifice for duty, they never tell you how much it hurts." Lily leaned against her mother's shoulder, her small hand reaching out to touch the aged paper. "That's so sad, Mom." Tom nodded solemnly. Many of these men had young families. The separation was harder than anyone could have prepared them for. As they continued sorting through the materials, Charlotte discovered a bundle of letters tied together with a frayed piece of string. "These look different," she observed, carefully untying the knot. "They're unmailed letters," Tom explained, leaning forward. "Sometimes soldiers would write letters they knew they could never send, too much classified information, or too personal. It was their way of coping." Charlotte began reading one aloud. "My dearest Marie, if you're reading this, it means I didn't make it home. There's so much I wanted to tell you, so many dreams we'll never share. I hope you'll find happiness again someday. Know that every moment away from you was torture, but I did this to protect the future, your future, our children's future. I love you more than life itself." Tears welled up in Charlotte's eyes as she finished reading. Across the table, Lily wiped her own eyes with the back of her hand. Duke, sensing their distress, stood up and pressed his nose against Charlotte's leg, whining softly. "There are dozens of these," Tom said quietly, spreading more letters across the table. Final goodbyes, confessions, hopes for their families' futures, all never delivered. They found more letters, each one more heart-wrenching than the last. One soldier wrote about missing his son's first steps. Another described the garden he planned to plant when he returned home, a garden that would never exist. Duke suddenly barked, the sound sharp and clear in the emotional silence that had fallen over the room. He barked again, as if acknowledging the weight of loss and longing contained in those pages. "It's like he knows," Lily whispered, reaching down to scratch behind Duke's ears. "Like he can feel how sad these letters are." Charlotte reached for another envelope, this one sealed and slightly crushed at one corner. Her heart skipped a beat as she recognized the handwriting, James's distinctive slant, the way he crossed his T's. But as she turned it over, she froze. The name on the envelope wasn't hers. "Mrs. Margaret Reynolds," she read aloud, her voice barely above a whisper. That's not." Tom looked up sharply. "Margaret Reynolds? She was Marcus Reynolds' widow. He was one of the men who went missing with your husband's unit." Charlotte stared at the sealed envelope in her hands, her fingers trembling slightly. Her husband had written a letter to another soldier's widow, and never told her about it. The implications made her head spin. Duke pressed closer to her leg, offering silent support as she held the unopened letter, its secrets still sealed inside, waiting to be discovered. "Mom?" Lily's voice was uncertain. "Are you okay?" Charlotte couldn't take her eyes off the envelope. "I'm not sure, sweetie," she answered honestly. "I'm not sure at all." The morning light continued to strengthen, illuminating the scattered letters and journals that told stories of sacrifice, loss, and undelivered messages. In Charlotte's hands, the sealed envelope seemed to carry the weight of yet another mystery, another piece of the puzzle her husband had left behind. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the windows of May's Diner, a small establishment on the outskirts of town. Charlotte sat in a corner booth, fidgeting with her coffee cup as she waited. Tom had positioned himself at the counter, pretending to read the newspaper while keeping watch. The bell above the door chimed, and an elderly woman stepped inside. Her silver hair was neatly styled, and she wore a simple floral dress. Margaret Reynolds looked exactly as Tom had described her. Charlotte's heart pounded as she stood, giving the subtle wave they had arranged over the phone. "Mrs. Reynolds?" Charlotte kept her voice low. "Thank you for meeting me." Margaret slid into the booth, her movements careful and measured. "You said you had something from the ranch? Something about Marcus?" Charlotte reached into her purse and withdrew the sealed envelope, her husband's handwriting facing up. Margaret's hands trembled as she took it, her eyes filling with tears at the sight of the familiar military stationery. "This was found with other letters," Charlotte explained softly. "It's from my husband, James. He served with Marcus." Margaret stared at the envelope for a long moment before carefully breaking the seal. The paper crackled as she unfolded it, and Charlotte could see her lips moving silently as she read. Tears began rolling down her cheeks. "It's true," Margaret whispered, pressing the letter to her chest. "Everything they told us. It was lies. Marcus didn't desert. He didn't abandon his unit." Her voice broke. "He died protecting them. Your James, he witnessed it all." Charlotte reached across the table, squeezing Margaret's hand. "Can you tell me what happened?" "The Colonel." Margaret wiped her eyes with a tissue. "Colonel Hale ordered them into a trap. Marcus realized it and tried to warn the others. He saved several men that day, but it cost him his life." She looked up at Charlotte. "Your husband carried this truth for years, protecting the real story until he couldn't anymore." Charlotte finished, her throat tight. They talked for another hour, Margaret sharing memories of Marcus while Charlotte listened, both women finding comfort in their shared loss. When they finally said goodbye, Margaret hugged Charlotte tightly. "Thank you," she whispered. "Now I can finally tell our children the truth about their father." Charlotte watched her leave, then nodded to Tom. They waited 5 minutes before heading out to his car. The late afternoon traffic was light as they pulled onto the main road. "That went well," Tom said, checking his rearview mirror. His expression suddenly changed. "Charlotte." She turned in her seat, spotting a black SUV 3 cars behind them. "Are they following us?" "Yeah." Tom took a sharp right turn. The SUV followed. "Hold on." He began weaving through side streets, taking random turns while Charlotte gripped the dashboard. The SUV stayed with them, maintaining a consistent distance. "They're good," Tom muttered, taking another turn. "Professional." He suddenly pulled into a shopping center parking lot, cutting across rows of cars before exiting through a service alley. The SUV briefly lost sight of them, and Tom used that moment to pull behind a large delivery truck. They waited, hearts pounding, until the SUV cruised past their hiding spot. Tom waited another 5 minutes before pulling out. "Who were they?" Charlotte asked, still watching behind them. Tom's jaw tightened. "I think I know." "Charlotte, there's something I need to tell you." He glanced in the mirrors again before continuing. "I've been researching Colonel Hale for years. The mission that killed Marcus Reynolds. It wasn't the only one. There were others, all with suspicious casualties, all with reports that didn't add up." "You think he betrayed them? His own men?" "I think he sold information to the enemy. The missions that went bad, they were compromised before they began." Tom's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "Your husband must have found proof. That's why he hid everything at the ranch." They drove the rest of the way in tense silence, taking a longer route to ensure they weren't followed again. The sun had set by the time they pulled up to the ranch, and Charlotte felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. As Tom parked, bright lights suddenly blazed to life, flooding the area with harsh white light. Charlotte threw up her hand to shield her eyes as car doors slammed and boots crunched on gravel. Colonel Hale's voice cut through the night, cold and clear. "Mrs. Carter, I warned you about meddling in things that don't concern you." Through the glare, Charlotte could make out several men in uniform flanking the colonel. Their stance was threatening, hands near their weapons. "You've been quite busy today," Hale continued, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Sharing stories with old widows, digging up ancient history. Let me be clear, meddling with the past will cost you everything." The floodlights cast harsh shadows across his face as he stepped closer, his threat hanging in the air like smoke. Charlotte stood her ground, even as fear coursed through her veins, knowing that everything had changed with the delivery of that single letter. The grandfather clock in the cabin's living room struck midnight, its deep chimes echoing through the silence. Charlotte sat at the kitchen table, her hands trembling as she turned the pages of James's journals. Duke lay at her feet, his warmth providing some comfort in the cold night. After the colonel's threats, she'd sent Lily to stay with her grandmother in town. Tom had gone to make some calls to his historian contacts, promising to return by morning. Now, alone with her thoughts and her husband's words, Charlotte felt the weight of everything pressing down on her. "What else were you trying to tell me, James?" she whispered, running her finger along the neat lines of his handwriting. The lamp cast a warm glow over the final notebook, its pages more worn than the others. Something caught her eye, a series of numbers and letters that didn't match James's usual writing style. The entry was dated just weeks before his death. B7W4N2E9. Remember the day we met? Same combination. Truth stays safe until needed. Charlotte's heart jumped. The day they met. She'd never forget it. She'd been working at the university library, reshelving books in section B7, row W4, shelf N2, book E9. That's where James had found her, reaching for the same book on military history. "The bunker," she breathed. "It's not just random numbers." Despite her fear of the dark and what might be waiting outside, Charlotte knew she couldn't wait until morning. Grabbing a flashlight and her phone, she whistled softly for Duke to follow. The German shepherd padded alongside her as they slipped out into the night. The bunker entrance was still roped off, but the soldiers were gone. Only cricket chirps and a distant owl's call broke the silence. Charlotte's flashlight beam bounced off the metal door as she and Duke descended the concrete steps. Inside, the air was thick with dust and memories. Charlotte counted the bunks along the wall. 7. Then 4 lockers, then 2 supply shelves. Her heart pounding, she moved to the east wall, counting 9 panels across. "This has to be it," she muttered, running her hands along the metal seam. There, a slight depression. When she pressed it, a small compartment clicked open. Inside lay a metal lockbox, no bigger than a shoebox. Charlotte pulled it out with trembling hands, settling on the floor with Duke beside her. The box was locked, but the key was taped to the bottom, just like James used to hide spare keys at home. Her phone buzzed, making her jump. A text from Tom. "On my way back. Found something important. Don't do anything without me." Charlotte hesitated, then typed back. "Already in bunker. Found something too. Hurry." She waited 20 tense minutes, jumping at every sound, before hearing Tom's familiar footsteps on the stairs. "Charlotte?" His voice called softly. "Here," she answered, relief flooding through her. Tom hurried over, his face tight with excitement and concern. "I've been making calls all night. My contacts confirmed what we suspected about Hale, but we needed proof. What did you find?" Charlotte showed him the box and James's coded message. Together, they inserted the key and lifted the lid. Inside lay a stack of official military orders, their edges yellowed but the text still clear. Tom's hands shook as he read them. "These are authentic," he whispered. "Operation Sandstorm." Hale knew the coordinates were compromised. He had intelligence reports warning of enemy presence, but he sent the unit in anyway. He looked up at Charlotte, his eyes wide. He ordered them to their deaths, then covered it up by reporting it as a failed mission. Charlotte picked up another document, a handwritten statement signed by James and 3 other soldiers, documenting everything they'd witnessed. 2 of those soldiers later disappeared. The 3rd died in what was ruled an accident. "James knew," she said, her voice breaking. "He knew Hale would destroy these if he found them. That's why he hid them here, where no one would look." More papers revealed a pattern of similar missions, each one ending in unnecessary casualties. Each one somehow benefiting Hale's career or bank account. The evidence was damning and complete. Tom carefully organized the documents, his historian's training taking over. "This is everything we need. Bank transfers, mission orders, witness statements, Hale's entire operation exposed." Charlotte picked up the final paper, a letter in James's handwriting, addressed to her. "My dearest Charlotte," it began. "If you're reading this, it means you found what I died protecting. I couldn't tell you before. It would have put you and Lily in danger. But these men deserved better than to be forgotten. Their families deserved the truth." Tears fell onto the paper as Charlotte gripped the documents. Looking up at the wall of photographs, all those missing men, all those grieving families, she whispered. "He didn't just die, he carried them all with him." Duke pressed against her leg as Tom placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, the weight of truth and justice finally within their grasp. The proof was here, preserved by a man who gave everything to protect it. Now it was their turn to make sure it saw the light of day. The morning sun had barely crested the horizon when the rumble of military vehicles shattered the dawn silence. Charlotte jerked awake at her kitchen table, scattered journals still spread before her. Tom was already moving, pulling equipment from his messenger bag, a portable scanner and laptop. "They're coming for everything," he said urgently, plugging in devices. "We need to work fast." Charlotte grabbed her phone, quickly typing out a message to Lily, who was still asleep upstairs. "Stay in your room until I come get you. Everything's okay." The sound of car doors slamming echoed outside. Duke's low growl preceded 3 sharp knocks on the front door. "Miss Carter, this is Captain Reynolds. We have a federal warrant to seize all materials found on this property." Charlotte caught Tom's eye. He nodded, scanner humming to life. She took a deep breath and opened the door. 4 soldiers stood on her porch, crisp uniforms stark against the weathered wood. The captain held out official-looking papers. "We need to collect everything immediately," he stated firmly. "Of course," Charlotte replied, purposely keeping her voice steady but uncertain. "But I'll need to read the warrant first. And call my lawyer." She deliberately took her time examining each page, asking questions about legal terms she already understood. Behind her, Tom worked frantically but quietly, photographing and scanning crucial pages. "These journals belong to my husband," Charlotte said, her genuine emotion buying more precious minutes. "They're all I have left of him. Surely I can keep just a few personal ones." The captain's expression softened slightly, but he shook his head. "I'm sorry, ma'am. The warrant covers all documents and materials." Charlotte nodded slowly, then walked them through the house at an agonizing pace, discovering items they'd already catalogued. Tom kept working, his laptop screen reflecting in his glasses, as he saved file after file. "The trunk's in the barn," Charlotte told them finally, leading them outside. As they crossed the yard, Tom slipped the flash drive into his sock and began packing up his equipment. It took over an hour for the soldiers to catalog and pack everything. Charlotte's heart ached watching them box up James's journals, but she knew the truth they contained was already safe in digital form. Once the military vehicles disappeared down the dusty road, Tom pulled out his phone. "I'm sending everything to my colleagues at the university right now. They'll start preparing a press release that will blow this wide open." Charlotte nodded, then reached for her own phone. She had calls to make, important ones. Opening her contacts, she found the number for Sarah Mitchell, the first widow she'd contacted. "Sarah, it's Charlotte Carter. I need your help reaching the others, all of them. It's time they knew the truth about their husbands." Over the next several hours, Charlotte made call after call. Some women cried. Others grew angry. All of them agreed to come. Tom's historian colleagues worked through the day, carefully crafting a release that would expose decades of corruption while honoring the fallen men. By late afternoon, it was ready. As the sun began its descent, cars started arriving at the ranch. Women stepped out one by one, many clutching papers Charlotte had helped them retrieve from their own homes, letters and journal pages their husbands had managed to send before disappearing. Sarah Mitchell arrived first, her silver hair catching the fading light. She hugged Charlotte fiercely. "We've waited so long for answers," she whispered. More widows gathered in the yard, 15 in total. Some knew each other from years of searching for truth. Others were meeting for the first time. Each one held a piece of paper that told part of their story. Charlotte led them to the barn, where she'd set up chairs in a circle. Lanterns cast a warm glow as darkness crept in. Duke lay quietly in the corner, watching over them all. "These men were more than soldiers," Charlotte began, her voice strong despite her tears. "They were husbands, fathers, sons. They saw something wrong and tried to make it right. They protected each other, and they protected the truth, even when it cost them everything." One by one, the women began sharing their pieces of the story. Margaret Wilson read from a letter describing her husband's growing suspicions about their missions. Jenny Torres held up a journal page where her husband had documented specific dates and locations. Each fragment added to the larger picture of betrayal and courage. As the last rays of sun painted the sky purple and gold, these women who had carried their grief alone for so long found strength in their shared understanding. Their sacred gathering was more than a memorial, it was the beginning of justice. "Tomorrow," Charlotte told them, "the world will know what really happened to your husbands. Colonel Hale's crimes will be exposed. But tonight belongs to us, to remember them as they truly were, and to honor the truth they died protecting." The lantern light flickered across tear-streaked faces as night settled over the ranch. In that old barn, surrounded by the echoes of sacrifice and love, healing finally began to take root. Sarah reached over and squeezed Charlotte's hand. "They carried the truth all these years," she said softly. "Now it's our turn to carry it forward." The circle of women drew closer, their voices mixing with the cricket songs and evening breeze, as they shared the stories their husbands had entrusted to them, stories of loyalty, courage, and unwavering faith in justice. The town hall's parking lot filled quickly as the sun dipped toward the horizon. Tom Alvarez had set up his live streaming equipment on the makeshift stage, carefully checking each microphone and camera angle. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted the final settings, knowing what was about to unfold would change everything. Charlotte Carter stood at the edge of the stage, watching as people filed in. Familiar faces from the grocery store, the post office, the local diner, neighbors who had whispered about the deserters for years. Now they would learn the truth. Duke sat alertly at her feet, his ears perking up at each new arrival. The widows gathered behind the stage, holding their letters close. Sarah Mitchell dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, while Margaret Wilson straightened her blouse for the 100th time. Jenny Torres paced, her husband's journal clutched to her chest. "Are you ready?" Tom asked, looking up from his laptop. The live stream counter already showed over 500 viewers, and more were joining every minute. Charlotte nodded, then turned to address the widows. "Remember what we discussed. Read exactly what they wrote. Let their words tell the story." Sheriff Daniels arrived, positioning himself near the back wall. His expression was guarded, but he gave Charlotte a slight nod. He'd seen the evidence. There was no denying it now. As the clock struck 7, Charlotte stepped up to the microphone. The crowd fell silent, all eyes fixed on her. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "For years, this town has lived with a lie. Tonight, we're going to hear the truth from the men who died protecting it." She gestured to Sarah Mitchell, who walked slowly to the microphone. Her hands shook as she unfolded her husband's letter. "My dearest Sarah," she read, her voice breaking. "If you're reading this, then I couldn't make it home to tell you myself. What we discovered here, it goes against everything we believed in. The Colonel is sending us on suicide missions, then reporting us as deserters, and when we don't return, he's covering up his own crimes with our blood." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Someone shouted, "That's a lie," but others quickly shushed them. One by one, the widows stepped forward. Each letter, each journal entry, added another piece to the devastating puzzle. Jenny Torres read from her husband's final entry, describing how they'd been abandoned behind enemy lines. Margaret Wilson shared her husband's desperate attempt to document the Colonel's orders before it was too late. The livestream chat exploded with comments. Local news stations began picking up the feed. Tom's historian colleagues were posting supporting documents and photographs, building an irrefutable case with each new revelation. Tears flowed freely in the audience. Parents who had hung their heads in shame for years now stood straight, their faces twisted with anger. Children who had grown up defending their father's names clutched their mother's hands, finally understanding the weight of truth. Charlotte watched it all, her heart breaking and healing at the same time. Then she saw him, Colonel Richard Hale, pushing through the crowd with his face red with rage. But before he could reach the stage, Charlotte pulled out the final piece of evidence. "These are the Colonel's signed orders," she announced, holding up the documents they'd found in the bunker. "Orders sending those men to their deaths, then falsifying reports to cover it up." The crowd erupted. Sheriff Daniels stepped forward, his badge catching the evening light. "I've seen the evidence myself," he declared, his voice cutting through the chaos. "These men were heroes, not deserters. And it's time justice was served." Colonel Hale lunged for the stage, but suddenly found his path blocked. Veterans who had come to listen stood shoulder to shoulder, forming an impenetrable wall between him and the platform. Men and women who had served, who understood the sacred trust between soldiers and their commanders, stared him down with cold fury. "You're finished, Richard," Sheriff Daniels said, moving through the crowd. "Your authority, your reputation, it's over." The Colonel's face drained of color as he looked around. Where once his very presence commanded respect and fear, now he saw only disgust and judgment. Decades of carefully constructed lies crumbled in minutes as the truth echoed through the hall and across the internet to thousands of viewers. Charlotte watched from the stage as the Colonel backed away, his shoulders sagging in defeat. The veterans maintained their line, a living memorial to their fallen brothers who had died protecting the truth. Sarah Mitchell took Charlotte's hand, squeezing it tight. "Our husbands can rest now," she whispered. "Everyone knows who they really were." The setting sun painted the sky in shades of purple and gold. Streaming through the hall's windows like nature itself was bearing witness to this moment of long-delayed justice. Duke pressed against Charlotte's leg, his steady presence grounding her as the weight of everything they'd accomplished settled over the room. Truth had finally broken free, carried on the voices of those who had waited so long to speak it. The gathered crowd stood witness, their shock turning to resolve as they faced this new reality together. The Colonel's authority hadn't just crumbled, it had been washed away in a tide of justice that had been building for years, waiting for this moment to break free. The morning sun rose gently over the ranch, painting the sky in soft pinks and oranges. It was different from all the other mornings since Charlotte had first arrived here. There were no soldiers, no helicopters, no tension in the air. Just peace, pure and simple. Charlotte sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by letters that had been arriving non-stop since yesterday's revelations. Some were from military families across the country, others from complete strangers touched by the story. Duke lay at her feet, occasionally lifting his head to watch her read. "Mom, here's another box," Lily called from the front porch, where the postal worker had just delivered more mail. She brought in a cardboard package filled with even more letters, her eyes wide with wonder. Charlotte picked up one of the letters, reading aloud, "Dear Mrs. Carter, thank you for giving my brother's memory back to us. For 20 years, we thought he had abandoned his duty. Now we know he died a hero." Tears welled in her eyes as she sorted through more messages. Some contained photos of the fallen soldiers with their families. Others included military medals that relatives wanted to donate to the memorial being planned. The phone rang. It was Tom Alvarez, his voice excited. "Charlotte, turn on the news. The Secretary of Defense is making a statement." She grabbed the remote, and there on the screen was a solemn-faced official standing at a podium. After thorough investigation of recently revealed evidence, the Department of Defense acknowledges that Operation Silent Shield was wrongfully classified, and its participants unjustly maligned. "We are officially declassifying all records related to this mission, and posthumously honoring the soldiers who gave their lives in service to their country." Lily hugged Charlotte tight as they watched. "They're finally telling the truth about Dad and his friends." Throughout the morning, more news trickled in. Colonel Hale was under investigation. The government was establishing a special commission to review similar cases, but most importantly to Charlotte, plans were already underway to create a proper memorial at the ranch. By early afternoon, trucks began arriving with construction materials. Local veterans had volunteered their time and skills to build the memorial. Charlotte watched from the porch as they worked, their movements careful and reverent. The memorial took shape quickly, a beautiful stone wall with a bronze plaque listing every name. Fresh flowers appeared as townspeople stopped by throughout the day, each paying their respects. The atmosphere was solemn but hopeful, like the lifting of a heavy cloud that had hung over the community for far too long. As the workers finished setting the plaque, Charlotte remembered something she had been saving for the right moment. She went to her bedroom and retrieved an envelope from her dresser, her husband's final letter to Lily, the one he had left specifically for this day. "Sweetheart," she called to Lily, who was helping arrange flowers by the memorial. "Come here. There's something your father wanted you to have." They sat together on the porch swing, Duke settling at their feet. The envelope felt heavy in Charlotte's hands, weighted with words long held back. "Your father wrote this for you," Charlotte explained, her voice soft. "He wanted you to read it when the truth finally came out." Lily took the envelope carefully, running her fingers over her father's handwriting. Charlotte put her arm around her daughter as she began to read. "My dearest Lily, if you're reading this, then your mother has done something amazing. She's helped uncover the truth I worked so hard to protect. I'm sorry for all the secrets, for all the times I couldn't tell you where I was going or why I seemed worried. You deserve better than a father who kept things from you. But I want you to understand why I did it. Sometimes, protecting the truth means making hard choices. I couldn't let those men's stories die with them. They were heroes, every single one, and their families deserved to know that. I've watched you grow into such a bright, caring girl. Every time I had to leave, it broke my heart. But I kept going because I wanted to build a world where truth and justice matter, a world worthy of you. Never doubt how much I love you. You were in my thoughts every moment, even when I couldn't be there. I'm so proud to be your father. All my love, Dad." Lily looked up from the letter, her eyes shining with tears and pride. "Now, everyone knows what Dad did," she said, her voice strong and clear. "He was a hero who protected other heroes." Charlotte hugged her daughter close, their hearts beating together in a moment of perfect understanding. Duke nuzzled their hands, offering his own form of comfort. As the afternoon began to fade into evening, Charlotte stood up. "Let's take a walk," she suggested. "I want to see how the ranch looks now." They set out across the fields, Duke trotting ahead of them. The land seemed different now, lighter somehow, as if it too had been freed from the weight of secrets. The old barn stood proud against the sky, no longer a place of hidden truths, but a testament to courage and loyalty. The golden sunset spread across the open fields, warming everything it touched. Where helicopter spotlights had once searched for secrets, there was only natural light now, honest and true. The grass swayed gently in the breeze, and birds called to each other across the peaceful expanse. Charlotte watched Lily running ahead with Duke, their shadows stretching long in the evening light. Her heart felt full in a way she hadn't experienced since before her husband's death. The truth they had uncovered hadn't just freed the memories of the fallen soldiers, it had freed them all. She took a deep breath of the clean, country air. "The truth is free now," she whispered, her words carried away by the gentle wind. Looking across the restored ranch, she could almost feel her husband's presence, finally at peace now that his mission was complete. If today's story echoed in your heart, I hope you'll stick around. Subscribe, and I'll be here again tomorrow with another story that speaks softly but stays deeply.